Hello, everybody. Thank you for tuning in to the Liberty Report. With me today is Chris Rossini, who is the co-host. Chris, welcome to our program.
Good morning, Dr. Paul.
Very good. The subject for today is something that was certainly in the news yesterday. It's been around, and it also touches on a subject I've been talking about for about 30 or 40 years. And that has to do with the Federal Reserve and who the new Fed chairman is going to be. And of course, we waited cautiously, hoping Trump would live up to his promises and, get a Fed chairman in there that would be more sensible, free market oriented, and, go through with the strong indication that Trump was for auditing the Fed. So we end up with getting Jerome Powell, and I know you know something about Jerome Powell. What do you think? Do you think we're going to get our audit, or is this more of the same?
Unfortunately, it's more of the same, and I'd like to start off by reiterating a point I made last week. It's when it comes to stirring up controversy and throwing red meat to the media, President Trump is excellent at it. He knows how to keep the left in a constant state of hyperventilation and how to keep his fans rooting for him constantly. But when it comes down to it, the warfare, the welfare, it's all continuing. There may be a lot of action in the front of the store, but in the back of the store, the big bosses are still calling all the shots, and Jerome Powell is just another indication of that.
Right. They had divided the potential candidates into two categories. The one that wanted to carry on what they're doing, and the others who suggested they ought to have some rules. The Taylor rule and maybe the monetarist rule. And of course, we could never get excited with a rule that's supposed to restrain, the Federal Reserve because they don't follow the rules. I think, well, what good would the rule be because they don't follow the rule in the Constitution? But anyway, Powell is a member of the crowd that said no rules, no rules. They don't want anything, and they don't want any audits, and they don't want any revelation of what they're doing. And of course, they say, well, it would be just a bunch of politicians in Washington, in Congress messing up things. And but the whole thing is when they say that they want independence, what they're talking about, and Powell has said this all the time, they don't want political interference. They're talking about secrecy. So you talk about secrecy, and I think these appointments demonstrates what's going on because, a lot of people, especially those that view our program, know something about the deep state. And I think it'd be safe to say that the deep state won. They win on foreign policy so often. And I think right now they again won on monetary policy. And the two go together. You could hardly find, a taking on of the deep state in foreign policy, but not in monetary policy, because you can't have the foreign policy unless you have the Federal Reserve. And I think that's what we're seeing. The deep state is very much in control.
Yes, Powell actually was a member of the Carlyle Group, and for those who have never heard of it, they are pure deep state. In fact, they're a revolving door, foreign policy-wise. They're big-time war profiteers. So that's where he's coming from. And he's in the same mold as Janet Yellen. In fact, our friend David Stockman, who was a part of the Reagan administration, calls Powell Janet Yellen with pants and a tie. So we're just switching out the faces. And it's really much different than when Trump was campaigning. He was castigating Yellen for creating a stock market bubble. But here we are about 11 months later, and Trump is now taking credit for the bubble.
And you know what? One article made the charge that Powell is going to be much closer to Schumer than he would be to Trump. And I'm sure Schumer's going to be very happy, because from the evidence, they will inflate and they'll do the things that liberals like. But I don't know whether there's a contest between Schumer and Trump. We don't know that much about Trump because although he was, he threw us, a little bone about, oh yeah, well, I think Fed sounds like a good idea. We really don't know a whole lot about him. Then they say sometimes he was appointed originally by a Democrat, by Obama, to the Federal Reserve. And then you have the Republican image, and they say there's more Republicans than Democrats on. But it's really irrelevant you know, because we make this point so often in foreign policy that there is bipartisanship, and they both support interventionism, and they both support, you know, the Federal Reserve. Even those individuals in Congress that would have liked to seen a little bit difference of trying to restrain the printing of money, it really was keeping intact the whole process. So it means that it's not a Republican and Democratic thing. It is strictly a policy operation, and the policy has been with us ever since it was originated in 1913, and every year it gets worse. And certainly the power of the Fed and the distortions that have occurred since 2008 have been astronomical. So they will be challenged. Powell will be challenged because they will be facing another crisis, and so far the only answer will be printing more money and keeping interest rates low. And of course, in spite of all the glorious announcements about how well the Wall Street's doing, there's still a lot of problems. And you know, if the slump arrives, or when the slump arrives, what are they going to do? Lower the interest rates dramatically to stimulate the economy? They're still barely high, so the recovery really hasn't occurred. And with the same people running the Federal Reserve, which is nothing more than a facilitator for raising taxes with the inflation tax, as well as financing the welfare warfare state. And this will continue, so it's a big deal, but we see no signs that there's going to be a reversal. Not that any of us really expected it, because it would have shaken the market significantly if they would have announced that they were going to free market determination of interest rates. That would have been a big deal, and the markets couldn't have handled that. So we can expect them to limp along like this and not ever offer any real change to monetary policy until that day comes when the dollar fails and our system fails, and then we'll have to do some serious thinking about what this system is going to be replaced with.
Right. As I was reading about Powell, I was amused by Reuters because they're saying that, well, he's a Maryland native, an avid cyclist, and a guitar hobbyist. And as if any of this matters. He may be a great guy. He may be a good friend, father, but no one is qualified to be a price fixer and a central planner of the entire economy. No one is qualified to manipulate all of our lives financially and to create money out of thin air. So it's not Powell and whether he's a guitar hobbyist or what he does. It's the system itself. No one should have these powers. But you'll never, ever read that in the media, unfortunately.
You know, frequently when I'm interviewed on the financial statements, they know what I'm saying and they understand, and they say, yes, but what if you were there? What would you do? Would you raise and lower? I said, I can't answer that question. It's impossible, because I don't believe in the authority. I don't believe anybody knows the answer. Nobody knows whether what the money supply should be or what the interest rate should be. That should be moving in the direction of letting the market determine this. But that is not likely to happen. We're going to continue with this process. And one thing that Powell did talk about when he was out of the Federal, before getting into the Federal Reserve, which tells the tale. Now, Federal Reserve Board chairman, traditionally, over the many years that I was there, always said, when I challenged them on their monetary policy, they would always sort of put the blame on the Congress. Well, we have to deal with a lot of things, the economy, and we have to deal with those deficits that you guys in the Congress run up. And of course, there's a conspiracy on that. That's on purpose. But they would say, well, it's the Congress's fault because they run up the deficits. But Powell may be more aggressive on just acknowledging that and not trying to pretend it's just the Congress's fault. Because when he was out of office, he lobbied for for making sure that the national debt limits could be increased. I mean, he was never a fiscal conservative, and he probably would be in the category of just eliminate any rules whatsoever on restraining of the Congress. But I don't think he should have, well, they do have the gall to do it, because he shouldn't come and say, oh, that's all the Congress's fault, because he believes these debts, and they have so much cockiness about we can manage it. We're monetary managers. Not only monetary policy, they think they can manage the whole economy and finance the foreign policy, take care of everybody who's dependent on welfare. And right now they seem to get away with it. But if we dissect into some of these economic factors that are even coming out today with the stock market sky high, we find out that there's a reason for the unhappiness in this country. And if you look at how well that lower 50% is doing, we also realize how poorly they're doing. And I don't think that, a month or two after Powell gets in office, you're going to see any improvement in that. It may be, getting much worse by that time.
Yes, I would imagine that if I was given the power to print money, I would be arrogant too. It's a soul destroyer because it's not meant to be that way. So in my closing, Dr. Paul, I would like to say that this really doesn't matter. It's just a change of faces. We're still going to experience booms and busts in our economy. We have to. Still going to experience inflation. The warfare and welfare state will continue to both mushroom until economic law finally puts an end to it. So even if President Trump, and obviously he hasn't made the change that's necessary, it is important for all of us to keep in mind what still has to be done, and especially when it all falls apart, what ideas need to replace the current ones.
And I just want to reiterate the point that things aren't good for the lower half of the economy population, and that's why there's so much unhappiness. Just this month it was reported that almost 1 million people dropped out of the workforce. 95 million people plus are not in the workforce, and yet the unemployment rate, 4.1%, historic lows. It's fantastic. And then they go on. But the only thing we're seeing, though, is the benefit of the 1% or a little bit more of those people in the stock market, because that money is flowing into this speculation and distortion of the investments. But that all is destined to clear. And the one thing that we must remember about the power of money managers, there's always people wanting to manage money, and it's been throughout all of history. They did it in different manners. But when you get to a fiat system like we have, a worldwide fiat system, the group of people who have control over creating the money are very, very important. And we know that group, the most important in the world, is the Federal Reserve. Federal Reserve Board, the Open Market Committee. The chairman is super important. Some people claim he's the second most important person in the United States. Guess what? I think he may well be the most important person because of what they control. And they control plenty. And when you have control of the creation of money and you get the appointments made from the deep state, you have to realize not only do they control the creation of money, they control the distribution of money, good times and bad. When good times are rolling, you keep the bubbles going. When bad times occur, you bail out their friends. So it's a terrible system. Fiat money always fails, and this one will fail. And when people press me and say, oh, is that going to be next month or next week? I don't know. I don't think anybody knows, but we do know that we're every single day, one day closer to that point. And it is held together, and right now people are pretty complacent and think it's perfectly all right and there are no worries, and sometimes that sets the stage for a sudden correction. But as many people know that follow this program, I'm very interested in the Federal Reserve, consider it one of the most important issues, not because of just the money issue, but because the money issue and the creation of money is what finances big government. It's big government that causes war and causes people to suffer the consequences. It causes us to lose our liberty because that's the way it's financed. Because the best thing that could ever happen if you wanted to stop the mess we have, get rid of the withholding tax, don't allow the government to borrow money, don't allow government to print money, and send every single person their bill in the country, and we pay it every 30 days. Believe me, it would end so quickly But no, we can delay the payment, we can hide it and pass it on to another generation. And right now you have to pick the victims and the beneficiaries, and right now with the tax debate going on, they're finding out who's going to benefit and who isn't, and who are we going to fool and who are we going to con into believing that we're not going to raise any taxes, everything is going to be all right, and we're going to not have to worry about the size and scope of government. The time will come, and that's why we're persistent in trying to send this message out that monetary policy is important because it engulfs all the other things that we do. Chris, I want to thank you very much for being with us today.
Great to be with you. Thank you, Dr. Paul.
Very good. And I want to thank our viewers for joining us in today with the Liberty Report. Please come back soon.